Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Ship, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Ship. Thank you so much for joining us today. Last week, we had the great pleasure of having Gabs Hayes on the show. If you didn't get a chance to tune into that episode, please do. We had a fabulous conversation, and I so much enjoyed having her on the show. This week, I'm especially excited to have Miss Janet Elliot on the show. Janet is the author of The Alien Savant. She shares a deeply personal and enlightening perspective on life as the sibling of an autistic individual. Her book highlights her brother's unique experiences and strengths while offering powerful insights into the sibling dynamic within the autism community. Through her writing and storytelling, Janet provides a heartfelt and nuanced lens on autism, fostering understanding and connection for families, advocates, and anyone seeking to broaden their knowledge. Please welcome Ms. Janet Elliot to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
It is great to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
Me too. And I really loved our conversation when we first met, and I knew I wanted to have you on the show because I was telling you on our call, I've never really had someone on the show with a sibling perspective. And,
Right.
you know, you have a very... I just loved the book, and I can't wait to delve into it for our audience listeners. But I really want to just start by asking, what first sparked your desire to write The Alien Savant?
Okay, what happened was we were preparing my parents' house to get it ready to sell. And I got the job of going through all the paperwork in my dad's office. So I ended up with all of Michael's drawings, which was his main form of communication. And then I came across a box that was full of all his school records and all his doctors and psychiatrists records. And I started going through it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is an incredible story. And I had already considered having the pictures published in a book just for the family. Now I thought, oh no, this is going to have a bigger audience than that. So I included the pictures in the book. There's 150 pictures.
Oh, wow.
And then the story of what happened from the time he was born in the early 60s onwards, so.
Yeah. And we talked about kind of, your brother's story growing up in that time period in the 60s and 70s, and how, autism wasn't even really a word or a term that people, it wasn't even in vocabulary, so to speak, right?
Right. Right.
So a little bit about, and you're in Canada, is that correct?
Michael grew up in Ontario, Canada, and mainly in Toronto.
Okay. So, your memoir takes us into, Ontario's special needs education in the 60s and even through the 80s. What stood out most to you in that system for you, especially watching your brother go through the system?
Well, I guess it's just that they tried to mold whatever children presented as different, all into the same category, all under one name, because they didn't have autism. There was certainly no spectrum or anything even vaguely like that.
Right.
All those kids, unfortunately, were labeled mentally retarded. So Down syndrome, autism, they were all considered one thing.
In one category.
Exactly. And that they couldn't function in the normal school system. And so they had institutions for them. And that's where almost all of them ended up. They got very little in the way of an actual education. They were just cared for.
Right.
And that was about it.
And you watched quite a bit of that growing up as a sibling. And that's kind of why, like when we first spoke, I was like, I love that you did this, because again, it's very rare that we hear from parents all the time, but very rarely do you hear from a sibling, on their perspective. And so, you've said that the story is devastating and heartwarming and hilarious, and I loved how you infused humor, into such an emotional, subject. How did
Right.
you, was that something that you felt like came naturally to you? Like it was
It
always kind of
comes
incorporated
naturally in
in?
my family. Yeah.
Okay.
Our
Yeah.
our family find humor in absolutely everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the way we are. So, and it helps you get through anything that's a little tougher.
Oh, yeah.
And believe it or not, my brother actually had a sense of humor for all that he, lacked a verbal communication. It came out more when he was an adult, but it certainly was funny. He used to have this feather, and he would run around the house with the feather and come up behind you, and you wouldn't realize he was there, and he would tickle the back of your neck and then run away. Like he thought that was hilarious. So just things like that. It would always lighten. And in the book, as you say, I see some of the things that we thought as a family were funny that
Right.
he used to do. Some of his strange habits were actually quite comical,
Right. And
like
it was
his
the way
his
he was
trying to sit.
communicating. Yeah.
Exactly. He was, it was. So,
Yeah.
uh, but it's a great way if you can see the funny side or the lighter side of anything in your life, it'll get you through a lot of things.
I know. Well, what's the saying? If you're not laughing, you're crying. So, so I guess,
Exactly.
and we do too. We try to find a lot of humor, in our family as well, because it is a hard subject, because it is
Yeah.
difficult on the daily, and so you have to find those breaks where you can then still move forward, and not hold. I think at first it was a lot of frustration for me because I just wanted to know how I could best help Drayson. But now I think it's also seeing his own personality come out in a different way. And, you mentioned that your brother was nonverbal. So was he nonverbal throughout his whole life?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
They tried when he was young. That was how he was hearing impaired, and that
Okay.
they wanted deaf children to speak. They wanted them to integrate into the rest of the world. They didn't. Sign language wasn't even allowed when he was young.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't come into play until a little later, and so yeah, he used. He used his drawings right, from the beginning, and that really developed a lot more again as he got older.
Yeah.
But yeah, that he used some sign language when he got older, but he couldn't hear, he couldn't understand what he did hear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that part of his brain wasn't functioning right,
Mm-hmm.
and the autism wouldn't allow him to sign properly because he wouldn't keep eye contact long enough because he didn't like it.
Right.
Um, so he used some sign language, his drawings, his some gestures. He always was able to tell us what he wanted or what he was thinking. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it,
You could
it,
always
it
at
was
least try to
kind
figure that out or identify
of,
what he wanted.
yep,
Yeah.
yep,
And
yep,
this comes from a time before even, today now for many children who are nonverbal, they have, assisted devices, AAC devices to help them communicate. But this comes from a time period where those things didn't exist really, hardly at all.
there were no electronic type of devices at all.
That
My
were
father
available to.
actually, my father actually tried to think of it. Um,
Right. Right.
uh,
But I think that it's really great that he was still trying to communicate with you even through drawing pictures. That's because that's kind of a very rudimentary AAC device, if you will, right? A non-form
yeah.
of electronics of how he was trying to communicate with you. What's the most powerful lesson that Michael taught you, and how has it shaped your life today, even beyond writing this book?
Oh, I guess the inclusion thing, the acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
of anybody who doesn't fit the what is considered normal.
Yes.
That as kids because we saw it all the time, and my parents made a, I don't know, a point of that is
Mhm.
that anybody who we had a young lady in our neighborhood who she would, I guess, probably physically in her 20s, but she was
Mhm.
definitely functioning at about maybe an 8, 10-year-old level. But my father always made a point of talking to her when she came
Mhm.
walking around the block, and and we were sort of expected to follow suit. Like
Right.
that. So that's was my biggest take of growing up at that time, is that there wasn't a lot of acceptance for those kids because everybody was a little fearful of them. They
Yes.
weren't sure how to react to them, especially one that's nonverbal.
Mhm.
Uh, so
Yeah. I
that
find
was
that
my biggest take.
sometimes things that are different for people, it makes them uncomfortable at first because it's just an unknown. And so I think that's at least what I've noticed with Drayson. It's like they they're just they're hesitant almost, and so it's like educating them or letting them know things about autism has kind of opened up that inclusion for us as a community by just letting people know, and asking and also asking for that acceptance. I've done that too, where I've asked for people to be open minded to accepting Drayson's autism and how he is, but I think that it's really interesting that you bring that to light even from years ago, because that's something even today we're still trying to continually, do is promote acceptance, right?
Right.
I know you've appeared on Autism Live and the Power of Advocacy. Like what community changes or conversations are you most proud of to have influenced by going down this journey?
Just what we just talked about here. That just explaining things to people, being more than willing to answer any questions that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about, as you say, my own experiences and
Mm-hmm.
situations that came up. I now have grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the twins. They're both
Mm-hmm.
on the spectrum, and
Okay.
they're 15 years old now. I like to advocate for them and explain how things have progressed, and I like talking about them. It helps people relate
Mm-hmm.
better when I tell how they're coping and what goes on in their lives. I just like talking about it, especially to people who haven't had a personal experience with it. That most people are very interested. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of
Yeah.
want to know what's going on.
Right. Well, and you have such a unique perspective to offer because, like I've said earlier, like it's not just the parent perspective. I mean, you're, growing up with a sibling on the spectrum, I don't know what that's like to experience that, and so I think that you do offer a different perspective because you're not in the mother or father role, right? And
Right,
so
right.
even knowing that, at a young age, did you ever feel like growing up that you had to stick up for your brother? I'm just
Oh,
curious.
yeah. It happened. It happened a few times. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, definitely. Where I had to do the, hey, he's struggling. He's having a hard time.
Hmm.
Lay off.
Right, right. Now,
Um,
were you older, or are you the older
I
sibling,
I
or?
am the oldest in the
Okay.
family.
Yeah.
Michael was 7 years younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did come into that sort of role of an older sibling. I would occasionally babysit him.
Yes.
So yeah, he was that much younger that I was in that position. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
So
yeah, go watch the kids. Time for you to
he was never
babysit.
he was never a problem because he would just be sitting there very quietly doing his drawings.
Yeah. I know. And I know we kind of talked about this on our call when we first spoke, but about for listeners who aren't caregivers or directly impacted by autism, what mindset shift do you most hope they take away from your memoir, from your book? Because I think it's a book that a lot of people who aren't even familiar with autism could read and gain an understanding.
That's what when I wrote it, I had to keep in mind that some of my readers were not, obviously not going to know Michael personally,
Right.
and we're not going to know a lot, maybe on a personal level, about autism. So I had to keep that in mind as I was writing it. Um, mainly when you now, hopefully, the person who reads the book, when they see a situation maybe happening in the grocery store where the parent's struggling with the child, they'll
Mm-hmm.
go, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I get it," right? They'll understand and they'll be more sympathetic, hopefully, to the situation. And even if they feel they could step in and help. If you see the mother trying to hang on with one hand and try to do
Yeah.
whatever, especially if she's got more than one child going
Yeah.
on.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, of
and so,
course.
it's just hoping that people take a little more active role, and at least have an understanding of what's happening
Yeah.
and not be fearful that it's
Yeah.
not a scary situation.
Yeah. And I do think compassion can go such a long way. I mean, I know I've seen moms, with their kids in the stores and you kind of, even with Drayson, there's been a few times he's had tantrums or meltdowns in the store. And it's like, I get the evil eye of bad parenting. Like, oh,
Exactly.
she's a bad mom, like, get your kid in check kind of thing. But now I've seen it where, Drayson's older now, and obviously we don't have as many problems with that. But it's interesting because I have run into moms before and, oh, I'm so sorry because their child's having a tantrum down the aisle. And I'm like, it's okay. It's, hey, I get it, So I think sometimes just being relational too for, siblings and family members and mom and dad it can go a long way. It really can go a long way. So I
Yeah.
think you bring up such a great point. So are you working on anything now? Are you doing any personal writing or advocacy work? Like what's on the horizon for you next?
I haven't been doing anything in the next little while as far as advocacy, although we were just talking about it, who and where I should approach. There is a couple of things in the book, uh, um, programs in that I talk about. I think I may approach those people and see if they're
Mm-hmm.
interested in having the book, and taken that. But I'm actually writing. I enjoyed writing about the 60s and 70s. So my next book it's underway, and it's
Yes.
actually to do with uh, my first marriage, which was kind of hilarious because it went on in the 70s, and it was an interesting time. And I compare it to things now.
Right.
Like just as simple as there was no cell phones. We had a
Right.
rotary phone,
Yes.
an
Yes.
avocado green rotary phone
Right.
attached to the wall, and
With the long cord
with a
and
long
yeah,
cord that
the long
would get
cord.
all tangled up, and
Yep.
and uh, and you had to watch it long distance calls. You had to pay for, and
Yep.
it was just a whole interesting time. So it'll be a little more of a comedy type of thing.
Oh, that'll
'Cause
be
I
that'll be
you know,
fun
but again, Michael will probably appear in the book as,
in the book.
as a
I know,
family
and for
member,
and
but
for our listeners today, I know we didn't really talk about this, but Michael is no longer with us, correct? When did he pass away?
yeah, March of 2021. It was
Okay.
quite sudden. We didn't know he had a heart condition, and it had
Okay.
been caused by the diabetes, and we didn't know, you know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And I think that what you've done for your brother and for you and for your family, just to write this memoir and write this book, I mean, I commend you because I'm sure that you went through your own waves of emotion putting this book together.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
had a few breakdowns as I
Yeah.
was writing it just 'cause it made me miss him.
Yeah.
And
Of
it's
course.
funny, I didn't realize, 'cause I was older and I was away married, when he was still, at home.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he was always at home 'cause, my parents did not want him going into um, a sheltered home when he was
Home.
an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he qualified to, and they do have them now. It's wonderful. They actually have supported homes, and they're broken down to, for autistic adults because they're
Mm-hmm.
going to have different needs than, say, a Down syndrome adult. You know, so
Yeah.
they do have, wonderful support. And I think most of the states have the same programs, very
Right.
similar programs.
Right. And
So,
your parents were very proactive during that time too, even though there weren't a lot of resources, right? We
oh
kind of
yes,
talked about the
especially
advocacy, right?
oh
I do
yeah,
remember
especially my
that.
dad.
Yeah.
Especially my dad. He went to bat for my brother all the time, like, and he wouldn't take no for an answer or we can't do anything about that. He would say, "Oh, yes, you can." So,
Good
and
for him.
he would insist on it. They usually they gave him what he wanted just to make him go away. Like,
Well, they say
but,
sometimes being the squeaky
uh,
wheel is not such
he
a bad
was
thing.
he was absolutely the squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
But but it was a good thing, and I got to see that. My sisters and I got to see, when you do have a cause or you do have something you want, keep going. If you
Right.
know you're right, keep at it. Find a different approach. But
Yeah.
keep going.
I think
So
that's such a
we're all
great,
kind of like that.
yeah. And
So,
I think that that's such a great, what a great way to take that lesson that you saw your parents going through, the trials and tribulations of things that they had to go through with your brother, and to know that, to have that confidence and to keep going, to learn to be that example. I think your parents were great examples of that for you. And so I think that it's amazing that you were able to go, oh yeah, I need to keep going on this, and to not take no
right.
for an answer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I may or may not have had a few encounters or situations with that myself. But anyway,
Where you've left your mark, have you?
yeah, I've been, maybe coined, involved, or
Yeah.
that I'm an active parent. That was one of the other words. I'm like, oh, is that the word we're using? Because I'm sure that's not what they were saying about me behind closed doors, but that's okay. I guess you kind of learn too, just not to really care to some degree about what other people think. And I'm sure that you probably encountered that too, even growing up with a brother, that, you're sticking up for your brother, but there's this component of you just really can't care about what other people think.
Yeah, you
And
have to reach that
yeah.
level. You do,
Yeah. And I would say, I'm going to assume that you probably learned that kind of at a young age, which is really admirable, because I feel like I learned it much later in life, But
right,
I think that that's such a great thing for you to have learned at a young age, because sometimes you have to push past what the stigma is, or what you think the consensus will think, right? And you have to go
right.
against the majority, and that's a really hard thing to do. For sure. I am so excited to hear about your next book too, when the time comes. I think that that's going to be hilariously funny. For people that are, especially parents and maybe siblings, that are dealing with a new diagnosis of their sibling or son or daughter, what advice would you have for them? Is there any advice that you would offer to our listeners today?
Oh, try to get involved. If you've got time, anything local that's going on to the, like, if you've got Boy Scouts in your area, or Girl Guides, Girl
Mm-hmm.
Scouts, anything like that, if you can get involved with that and be a helper,
Yeah.
even if you don't have a lot of experience with those, you'll be there to sort of say, oh, okay, let's, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the situations that require more than one adult to help.
Right.
And if you're in a position with an adult that's autistic, being if you're in the position to hire them, or you're in a
Mm-hmm.
position to like be open to that and realize there's also help for you in your business if you want to hire somebody who's special needs, like,
Mm-hmm.
there is programs and help for that. So
Yeah.
but be open to that, give it some consideration.
I love
You
too
may be
that
very
you,
pleasantly surprised. There is
yeah.
some companies that are functioning solely with autistic
Yes.
persons, like,
Yes.
which is wonderful.
Yeah,
So,
there's a couple businesses here in the valley actually that have hired Like there's one that it's a sandwich shop, and the whole staff is special needs, and then they even do things for the kids and the young adults after hours, like social groups where they can get together and they have a place to hang out. And I love that they formulated that for them in this community, because we do need to give them those outlets as well, and to be able to stay active.
Sure.
Like, it's different than running them to therapies. And I always say that because like Drayson's getting ready for his bocce ball tournament, and then we're going to do golf camp with him coming up. And I just want him to have the exposure of trying to do these things to see if he likes doing them. And if he doesn't, that's okay. But at least I can say that I exposed him to it. And it's something different than, he works so hard. We always say he's the hardest working person in our family, and he doesn't even know it, because he goes to school, he goes to therapies, he's so structured. So I think that you bring up an excellent point to talk about other things other than just the therapies, like get out and see what is happening in your community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And how you can involve special needs people in your community and see where they are. And if you can be of some help, great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if nothing else, just be accepting of the fact, that they're there.
Right.
So.
And it's so important, because I think because they don't show a lot of emotion, there's an automatic assumption that they don't care or that they don't feel the way that we feel. And I always tell people, I'm like, if anybody needs community more, it's Drayson, because he does thrive off of connections just as much as I do, or my other son or my other family members. Like, he does thrive off of connection. And I think sometimes we forget about that.
Right. And you see, he doesn't know how to initiate it himself.
Right.
But you can just sort of sense that he needs it and he wants it, and how he responds to it.
Right.
So.
Oh, yeah. It's been heartbreaking for me to watch a few times, but at the same time, I keep trying to push forward. Like you said, just keep pushing forward, because I do think it's important for him to learn his own way as well, to initiate and communicate. And I hope that develops for him over time. I mean, that's one of my greatest wishes,
Right.
But,
right.
Janet, I absolutely have loved having you on the show today. And for those of you listening in about, want or interested in the book, The Alien Savant, I'm going to post in the show notes all of the information on how you can get a hold of Janet, as well as pick up the book. We'll list that in the show notes as well. But I just so much appreciate you for being here today. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Nikki. I enjoyed it.
Yes, absolutely. And I love your heart. You have so much love and light, and I appreciate you for being such a beacon of light in this community and pushing forward. Yeah, I know. Love and light. Absolutely. Well, this concludes our episode for today. If you have questions, comments, or even a show topic that you would like to hear about, please send me an email at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you haven't done so already, or feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you like what you're hearing, please spread the word so that we can continue to empower autism families. And feel free to give us a good rating on your preferred podcast platform of choice. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, keep working on your puzzle. And remember, you don't have to have it all solved in a day. Take care.